Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another video. This video I'm going to show you guys a super requested video, which is my controller scheme, my control settings, whatnot, the buttons and everything. And I'm going to explain to you guys the reason for every button and why this setup is the best you can use. And I'm pretty sure after I give you guys the explanation, you're going to have to agree with me because it's just logical that it is the best. So obviously go into options if you want to switch your settings. The first thing that comes up is really like the volume. Unfortunately on DVD you can't really switch the specifics, like you can't like specifically down the music alone or like the footstep sound, the generated sound. You can't be specific. It's like a general overall setting, so everything volume you're reducing or increasing. So I just have it at max because then we can hear footsteps and things like that. So if you don't have, make sure you have it doesn't have to be max, but make sure it's something you can hear on your phones, especially so you can, hear footsteps if you're playing killer. You can hear survivors when they're injured, survivor as well. Sometimes you can even hear the killer walking if you have a good enough headset and you're, pay attention to the sounds and everything. So make sure there's a adequate volume. I can't really tell how much that would be for you, but, test it out so you can hear all those things that will help you play. Menu music is completely optional if you want to take it off or not. 0 or 100, up to you. This is inverted. I don't use it inverted, but if you're that type of guy, it essentially just switches. Like if you press up, it's gonna look down. If you press down, it's gonna look up. It just inverts everything. If you're that kind of into that kind of thing. Now, sensitivity. I personally am using the one that I'm comfortable with is 70 or 75 is what I've been using. I use the same for both. You don't have to use the same for both, but I personally use the same for both. The one thing you should know about sensitivity though is that there's no like fixed number. There's no best number for sensitivity. It's all relative to you. So one thing that it is universal though is that the higher the sensitivity, the more likely is that you're gonna be less accurate. Okay, so more speed, less accuracy. Less speed, more accuracy. So it's like the inverse. The slower, the more accuracy. The faster, the less accuracy. That's not necessarily, but what it tends to be most of the time happen to people. Because some people can play on 100 and still have a lot of accuracy, but most people won't. I'm just saying. But so what I mean is test it out, see what works best for you. But you should keep in mind that if you're missing too much, it's probably because your sensitivity is too high. If you're playing like a Huntress, for example, which this is gonna influence her a lot. For basic killers, maybe higher speed is going to be a bit more beneficial than the accuracy because you're going to essentially just do normal melee hits. So the only thing you're really going to have to deal with is the mostly 360s and things like that. So having a higher speed would help you turn the camera faster so you can deal with those 360s. Because sometimes, especially a controller, you miss the hits simply because your camera cannot turn fast enough, not because you're actually, not turning to the wrong direction and things like that. So increasing the speed will fix that. 100 is probably too much as well, depending on, I would say 70 is already pretty high sensitivity. And I like to use the same for Survivor. Now that's for killer, right? For Hunters, for example, which accuracy is a big deal. An example I can give you guys is, for example, for close range, the faster the speed is better, right? Because you can, you're going to be moving faster in front of you than they will be moving like very far away from you. So, for example, for long shots on Huntress or Depth Slinger would be a good example as well. You definitely would want to have a slower sensitivity, so you have more accuracy and less speed, because the speed is not going to be really necessary at that range. You know what I mean? But the opposite is also true. For close range, since they're moving a lot faster, like in relation to your screen, their position is changing a lot faster. Your aim actually has to be a little quicker to be able to follow them, unless you're doing things like pre-shot and whatever. But that's not the point of the video. So for closer ranges, the higher the speed would be a little bit more beneficial than the slower speed with higher accuracy. Just so you guys understand the dynamic. The faster, the less accuracy. So if you're using like 100, it's probably going to be pretty impossible for you to get long shots with 100. Unless you're those like 1% that can play at 100 and still have that super perfect accuracy. What you should base yourself here, if it's too high or too low, is really. You always want to go as fast as you can handle. However, that handle means you're 100% accurate. Like you're never you know, when you're missing is because you're actually missing, not because you're you know, you're trying to aim but you're just kind of overreaching. You know, if you feel like you're aiming right but you're just overreaching, that's probably a sign that your you know, your speed is too high. You should probably decrease it a little bit, so you can get to that accuracy where essentially you never miss. Essentially, like, you think I'm gonna hit this target, and you hit the target every single time because you're so like in tune with the sensitivity, and it's not fast enough to where you're losing control. You also don't want it to be too slow, because otherwise, like I mentioned, for example, on the 100, so if you're playing like a 10 sensitivity, for example, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it would be way too slow for you to get a close range hit, for example, with the 100s. You pretty much would never be able to get a hit like with that slow of a sensitivity. So just remember, guys, this is a balance. There's no fixed number. It's a balance, and you gotta be able to evaluate yourself to see what would be perfect. For me, I try playing at 100. I can actually play on 100, no problem. But I'm not as consistent. I missed a few shots. Same thing for a nurse. You know, I tend to overreach a little bit. Like, I don't, let's say like 40%, 30%, I miss simply because I'm overreaching. You know, out of all my attempts. However, if I reduce it to 70, that 30% miss, you know, comes down to like maybe a 10% miss, you know, or no miss at all. So it's much better. That's what I mean. That's what you want to go for, is consistency, a sensitivity that gives you consistency, not simply for the fact of speed alone. You know, but just understand the dynamic is that the higher it is, the less accurate you're gonna tend to be, and the lower it is, the more accurate you're gonna tend to be. But you know, the speed is gonna be inverse to that. So that was a long explanation, but that covers the sensitivity. This is personally what I use. If you guys want to try that, or 75, I've used 75 before. Right now, I don't really care, so I'm using 70. But I was using 75 before. I tried 100. Is definitely too much. Just a quick tip, I guess, from my personal experience. For nurse alone, which is a killer, which I think the higher the sensitivity, the better. I mean, the speed of the sensitivity would make the most difference out of all the killers would be the nurse. For her, I would say about 80% is already more than enough that you need. You're not gonna get like 360 nothing. With 80% is more than enough. Okay, so anything higher than that, I would say, is pretty much overkill. But if you can play, do that, because the faster the speed, you know, the faster your reactions as well, which is a good thing. So again, lastly, to finally close this point, you want to go as fast as you can, maintaining 100% accuracy. Okay, consistency. That's gonna base your number here for you personally. Tutorials, if you want to, you know, do it yourself or not. Crossplay, I always have it on. Some people ask me. I don't see any problem playing against PC nurses and whatever, so I have it on. PC players still get, you know, you can still beat them or not. Yeah, and that's about it. Anything else is really not that important. Now, guys, one thing as well, for Survivor, the higher the sensitivity can also work against you, because you know, it might cause you to overreach too much as well when you're looping, when you're turning the camera to loop the structure, or follow the killer for that matter. And that will cause you to hit the walls more often, you know, as you're running, which is gonna, you know, be bad for your looping. So for that reason alone, you should also not, you know, also try to find that accuracy. You notice that, for example, me personally, at 100, I got used to it a little bit, but I was still sometimes hitting the walls and things because I was turning the camera way too quickly. The speed was too high, and that was causing me to hit the walls a little bit. So by turning it down to 70 again, it completely fixed that problem. So just have that in mind. For Survivor, it does also matter the sensitivity there. If it's too high, it might cause you to overreach on things as well, which will mostly come down to hitting the walls when you're not intending to, because you know, as you're looping, you have to turn the camera and everything to follow the structure and maintain the direction you're going and everything while still looking at the killer. So that can also work against you. But yeah, that covers for Survivor. As well as things such as flashlights, for example. Obviously, the higher the sensitivity, it might be kind of too hard to control the flashlight because it's just moving way too fast. So you're gonna lose some accuracy on the flashlight as well if your sensitivity is way too high. So those are a few things you can keep in mind for when playing Survivors. It's really just mostly gonna affect the looping and the flashlighting. Now, finally, controls. I already covered the sensitivities and everything. So this is the best, and I'm gonna show in game after why I think it's the best. Okay, so I'm gonna explain you guys one by one, and then I'm go in game on Kill Your Friends, and I'm gonna show you guys why. I'm gonna show in practice why. So obviously, left analog stick for movement. For running, I like to use L2. I just think it's more comfortable for me personally to hold the L2 for a long time than it is to hold the L1 for a long time. So that's the only reason why I have it. These buttons that I like to press for a long time and hold for a long time, I like to use on the L2s and R2s. Hold on, I switch your mistakes. So wait, hold on. Let me go for survivor, right? Because this is well, you guys can see this is for killer, but let me go to survivor so you guys can see the controls, because that's what you guys are here for, right? So that another reason why I like to have the most important buttons on the top buttons. The top buttons, when I say top buttons, I mean the R buttons and the L buttons. The reason for that is because you need speed. For the key buttons, you need speed, and you also you don't want to mess with your cam. Like if you have the button on X, for example, you have to take your finger off the analog to press it, which is a bad thing, because every time you take the hand out of your analog, you're essentially losing control of what's happening in your camera, you know? I'm going to show you that better on the actual practice game there. So again, for that reason, I like to hold L2 for running, just because I feel feels more comfortable to me to hold that button for longer durations. Now crouch I have on the D-pad. Now this is probably weird to a lot of people, like how are you going to crouch with the D-pad? However, there's a technique that you can use, which is essentially the grip, how you hold your controller. The reason why I'm able to use this right here is because I'm not holding the controller like a normal, you know, like an average person would. It's not that I play the entire match with this other grip type of way. It's just that I switch to this grip when I need to, you know, to be able to do the crouching and everything else that I'm going to show you guys here. So that grip is called claw grip. I'm going to write on the screen for you guys. It's claw grip. You guys can probably Google it and you find images. Essentially, you're kind of using your index finger to press the button. In this case would be the D-pad. That's kind of the only difference. You know, you're using your index finger, and that forces your hand to change position a little bit. If you guys Google the picture, you see what I mean. And if you have a controller and you want to follow me as I'm explaining here, especially during the practical, at the end of the video when I show you in game, you'll be able to feel what I mean, you know, and you see how good it feels. So that's for the crouching. Now for using the item, I have the R1. This is also very important. Activate ability would be something like Dead Heart or a perk. It's very important that these are not the same, because otherwise they're going to create conflict. Everything here is, you know, I would not recommend changing, because they're synchronized in a way where there's no conflict. Like in any point, there's going to be like the same button would do two things, you know? Because if that happens, for example, if you have a skill check when you're trying to heal, for example, you might use For the People, which is a perk. You might end up using For the People when you're trying to actually use a skill check, because they're set to the same button. You know what I mean? So to avoid those kinds of things, I set up in this particular way, which completely there's no like conflicts. So moving on, using item R1, just everything like map, keys, flashlights, R1. You just have to hold it for the flashlight, for example. Dropping items, this is, you know, kind of doesn't matter. I like to have it on the circle. Personally, it could be X, it could be whatever you want here, as long as it's not the top buttons, okay? So anything like circle, or maybe it could even be this D-pad, for example, the left D-pad, because I'm already using down here the right D-pad and the down D-pad. So if you want to use the left for dropping items as well, you can do that. Don't matter. Just use the buttons either to the left or to the right for this action specifically to your best comfort. I personally use circle. So moving on, picking up the item, or rather interactions, as well as actions, I use both R2. This would be essentially like you know, picking the item from the floor. So you're dropping with circle, and you're also picking it up with R2. Now the reason for this is going to be everything like action related, such as like chests, lockers, you know, doing gens, jumping windows, vaulting pallets. This is going to be R2. And now moving on, this is pretty simple, right? I'm going to show you better on the practice. Now this is something also a lot of people are probably going to feel is weird, but if you try it, you're going to see it feels pretty good. Which is I'm using the R3 for Skillchecks. Again, so it doesn't create usually I would use L1, but that's going to create conflict with this activate ability thing. So for a perk, for example, you might end up using a perk for accident or something else when you're actually trying to just do a skill check. So having it R3 completely nullifies that. And you can actually press the R3 as you're moving your camera as well, so it's really no big deal. I'm going to show you that again on the more practical at the end of the video. Hook struggle is kind of up to you as well. I would just use any button that you want here that's from the either left or right side of the controller, such as circle, you know, triangle, square, X, or any one of the D-pads here. Up to you. I like to use this D-pad specifically. because I think it feels better to smash this than it feels to smash the X button, for example, you know? So that's the reason why I use it there. And finally, activate ability, which would be any kind of perk. I like to use L1, or I think it actually would be, for example, if you're using insta heal, for example, on your medkit, though that would be considered ability as well. So you're essentially holding R1 to use the medkit, and then you would press the L1 to use the add-on for the insta heal. And finally, aiming would be the right analog stick, right? And like I mentioned, I'm using the right D-pad and the down D-pad for the actions. So now let's move on to finally to the practical side, so I can show you guys better. Okay, guys, now to showcase the practical side in game. So I have the sound of the game muted because we were talking a lot during this, so as not to confuse you guys, so you only hear my voice, okay? So I'm gonna have to disable the sound of the in-game, but I'm gonna showcase the items here first. So like I mentioned, R1. If you're using a key, for example, for reading the aura, it's pretty easy to hold R1. You see, I can still move my camera as I'm holding the R1 button, so I never lose control of my camera. This is the reason why I have it on the top button, is because I never lose control of my camera while using it. And you can see right here, right there, I'm trying to show you guys that you can still use it during chase, just because of the fact that you never lose control of your camera. This is the reason why I use certain buttons on the top buttons, the R and L buttons, because it allows you to not lose control of the camera while you're pressing the button. Now here I'm showing the lockers. Is the same thing. You never lose control of your camera, and the R2 is going to be the button for deception, which is the new locker perk. So no problem there as well. And just going a locker in general, it would be the same thing. As you can see there as well, I'm spinning. I can do any sorts of things with the holding the R1 for activating my item. So now I'm gonna showcase you guys all these perks, because these are all the perks that will cause the conflicts. You know, if you're trying. So I'm showing, even if you guys do not use these perks in particular, that may cause conflicts on the setups. The setup that I'm showing you guys is gonna certify that no perks in the entire game will have any type of conflict. So I'm showing you guys the little rock here for Adam. As you can see, as soon as I crouch, I'm able to use it with the L1, which is, like I mentioned, is any ability or perk. You see, I can walk, and as soon as I stop, I can use the perk on the L1. And because it's a L1, I can still also move my camera without. I never take the finger out of my analog. You see right there, I can still walk around, and I just turn to my rock, and at any point I never lose control of my camera. I can or my movement for that matter. I'm constantly moving, and the L1 is also a really fast button to press. So it doesn't take too long. You can use the ability right away immediately. No more than half a second. Rather than if you're using L2, for example, which takes a little longer to press down on the button. So this is another reason why I use L1 and R1 for key buttons such as dead hard, abilities and flashlights, because you want that thing to activate like instantly. So you want a button that's going to press quickly. So that's why I'm using the L1s and R1s for that, because those would be the quickest buttons on the entire controller that you're going to be able to press. So you get that fast activation right away, especially if the game is laggy and all that. You don't want any delay. So right here, I'm going to show you guys for the people, and you can see right there, I'm healing again with R2, which is the actions, and I can still move my camera easily. If the killer comes, I can see him. I never have to stop my action to see what's going on. And you see, just like that, easy L1, I can use the for the people, no conflict whatsoever. I didn't use my item, I didn't press a skill check, everything was fine. I can just normally move my camera at all times and still use for the people. And right here, I'm really just showcasing Dead Hard, which is the same thing. I can move my camera, normal chase, and at the very fast press of a button there, I can just use Dead Hard. It comes out right away instantly with the L1, which is a super fast pressing button. It doesn't take long, like pressing, holding full down on L2 and things like that, or taking my hand off the analog so I lose control of my camera to press it, such as X. I see people using Dead Hard on X. You have to lose control of your camera. You see right there, I'd never lose control of my camera. I'm constantly looking at the killer, and I can just choose to use Dead Hard whenever I want to. Whereas if I have on X, if you imagine I'm looking forward, I cannot look back before I use my dead hard, because I have to remove my finger from the right analog stick to press the X, and that way I cannot be looking back while I'm using my dead hard, or keep constantly moving essentially. So that's the reason why I have it on the top buttons as well. Right there, obviously, it's not a root chase. I'm just trying to show you guys the buttons. And here's the same thing. You see right there, I'm showing you guys that, during the window, I can move my camera at any point. You see, I'm doing all kinds of turns right there. I can constantly have awareness of what's going on because I have the action button on the top buttons, which in this case would be the R2, which again allows me to never have to take my finger off the analog stick. So I'm in constant awareness of what's going on. I can look at anywhere on the map. Same thing for the pallets here. I'm just trying to showcase it. You can easily loop here following the camera and just, drop the pallet when you have to with the R2. Vault the pallet, the same thing is going to be the R2 there. And now so that covers pretty much all the perks, right, that I show you guys there. No conflict whatsoever with the Skillchecks. And I'm going to show you guys the gens as well. The gen, the way this build is set up, the settings here, you can do a gen with only one hand on your controller. So you do not actually need your two hands on your controller with the setup to hold gens and do any kind of actions. Because like I mentioned, you don't even have to lose control of your camera to do anything. So same thing again here, R2 to open the chests, and you see I have full control of my camera while I'm doing the action at all times. If I have to leave anytime soon because the killer comes, I can just easily react and fast react to it. And now I'm gonna pick up the item R2 again, as you can tell, and the circle would drop the item here. Now luckily I got a flashlight, so I can actually showcase you guys the flashlight. You see L1 is on the dead hard and flashlight is on the R1, so no conflict there whatsoever, and both of them are on fast pressing buttons. So you see R1, I can easily aim. Again, I don't have to take my hand off my finger off the analog to use it. You see right there, I can use that hard at any point. Just a quick L1 press by holding the controller. Everything is just synchronized and working at the same time. You can do turns, everything right there. You can press the flashlight while turning, no conflict whatsoever. You never have to move your hand, your fingers, to press the X button or anything of that nature. Everything is just fluid and super, fast and natural. And so yeah, that's the reason why I think this build is the best. It's just everything is thought out, and as it should be. So there's no conflict. Everything just works perfect, so you can play your best. And here I'm just showing again the locker how I can move my camera and everything very easily while getting into it. I never have to compromise my awareness to and also my speed on the pressing is on point, and I also never have to compromise my camera to press any kind of button. Now I'm gonna show you guys the gen here. This gen you can hold, like I mentioned, you can do this only with one hand. You see, I'm holding R2 here, and you can see I can still move my camera. R3 right there, as you can tell, I can use the Skillcheck. And you see, I'm just showing you guys I can turn the camera and do be aware at all times as I'm holding the R2 there. And you can do this only with on your right hand, for example. That means your left hand is free to do whatever you want. I know some people like to do gens. I don't know, maybe you're on the PC or something. You play on your phone. You can literally do other things while you're doing the gen or any sort of action like healing, just because you can do the setup with only one hand, which is the R2, and you're also moving your camera with the your left hand as well with your finger. So this is an entire right hand motion, doing the gens or any sort of action, which allows your left hand to be free to do whatever you want simultaneously. So it's a very comfortable to do this way if you ever never tried it. Do gens with only one hand on the controller. And you see right there, I'm trying to showcase here that I can press the R3, which is R3, just so you guys know, is when you actually press the analog stick. You're not just moving around the analog stick, you're actually pressing it down. That's the R3 button. And you can see right there, I actually missed a good check there because I'm trying to show so hard, but you can actually move the camera while you're pressing the R3 as well, so no issue there. You also never lose control. And R3 also a pretty fast responding button, which is something that's kind of important for Skillchecks as well. So you can get those great Skillchecks, you need a fast responding button. So that helps. Like for example, using R2 on a Skillcheck would be kind of weird because it's not as fast responding as a R1, L1, or R3 in this case. So for that reason, also. And I think this pretty much covers everything on the build, guys. So you can do gens with one hand, like everything is just so good. So this is why I think is the best build. Both for comfort and as well as competitiveness, so you can actually play your best and perform your best. Now, finally, the last thing I want to showcase here. I didn't show the med kit, but you can imagine it's the same thing. Just hold R1 and he's gonna heal normally, just like if you use the flashlight. Is the crouching. So you see here, I'm using the claw grip. Every time I'm crouching and walking at the same time, I'm using the claw grip right there. And you can see I can still move around with full control of my camera. I never had to remove my hand off, lose the awareness of, lose any, awareness of what's going on. I can still move around perfectly with the crouch on the top D-pad. I think the top D-pad is probably the best for this actually, guys. Okay, so for the crouching on D-pad, I actually think the top button is the best one, most suited, more comfortable as well. As you can see, the killer is close. I can easily look at him while still moving around. I'm using the claw grip now. I'm not using the claw grip anymore. You see, I already switched. When I'm doing the crouching, I'm using the claw grip. When I'm not using the crouching, I'm using the normal grip. So yeah, guys, that's the video. This showcases everything, and see you guys on the next video.